But at least I've come to a point where I know there's always more and that I don't have it figured out. Because when you start thinking you got it figured out because you've had some spiritual experience or this or that, thinking that's the be all end all, you can know for sure that you're off the track a bit. So, because there's so much more to know. And a lot of NDEers will say that. They came back, they went out to the other side and they felt like they knew everything, and then they came back and they couldn't remember it all. That's another thing. Enjoy life. We're here to have joy too, my friends. Live, love, laugh, have that piece of cake or that piece of chocolate or whatever it is, or that beer or that glass of wine, instead of beating yourself up, and enjoy it. Hello, my friends. How's everybody doing today? So I decided to just turn on the microphone and see what comes to mind. And what comes to mind is the Great Awakening. Is there really a Great Awakening going on? A spiritual awakening, so to speak? Some people say yeah, and some people say no. Or is it just some new age hype or something? Again, several opinions on that. In my opinion, if you've listened to this channel, you know that I think there is a great awakening of sorts going on. But what does that mean? Well, in my opinion, a lot of what's happening in the world today is a part of that. Some of it seems unrelated, like in the political realm and so on. However, people are waking up to things that they didn't know about or didn't understand or were lied to about. There's a lot of lies coming to light that in our culture about things that have happened, and especially in the political realm, they're being exposed. And a lot of people are having a hard time with it. And there's like this great divide, so to speak. There's two camps kind of, And so here's the problem, that everybody looks at things, well, I shouldn't say everybody. A lot of people look at things very black and white. It either is or it isn't. There's either a great awakening or there isn't. In my opinion, the great awakening happens to individuals to the degree that they're ready. There's not this one-time event where everybody just wakes up and understands everything and understands the spiritual realm or sees the spiritual realm for the first time, that sort of thing. It's an ongoing process in person's life. Now, there may be milestones where it seems like, wow, I just woke up, and you can go online and read posts from people who say, I've had a spiritual awakening, and now I know everything. Well, that's their first mistake, is thinking they know everything because they've had the spiritual awakening. It's just the first of many awakenings that you're going to get, which is a good thing, because you can't, if everything came out all at once, it would cause complete chaos and breakdown in society and so on and so forth. And so that's why sometimes it seems like it takes too long for certain things to change. But things are changing slowly. The younger generations, there's this divide between I shouldn't say divide, that there's this sort of rivalry between the generations. The older generation is always talking about how the younger generations are lazy and they didn't have to go through the same things that we did, and so on and so forth. And every generation does that with the younger generations. But the truth is that there's lazy people, and there's people who had it easy in every generation. And there's smarter, more intelligent people, or more reasonable people, I should say, in all the generations. Not all the millennials are useless and worthless, Yeah, there's probably a faction of but there's a faction of the boomers and the Gen X and Gen Z and so on also in the same category. It's probably relatively the same percentage in every generation. In my opinion, I have no way to measure that or no statistics. That's just my thought on it. But it's kind of the same thing with the awakening, the Great Awakening. There's various degrees of awakening that people are waking up to. And of course there's the religious influence. I came through religion, and there's that influence there that everything should be the way I believe it should be according to my religious beliefs. And even the people who say, well, I'm not religious, I'm just spiritual, sometimes they do the same thing. And so Religion nowadays seems to mean a set of certain beliefs that people agree on, a consensus of beliefs. And so I happen to believe this entire reality is a consensus belief reality. Now, yeah, we have these different factions, but if you've listened to this channel, you know that I believe we create our reality through our thoughts and our beliefs, and of course, our actions. And people say, well, yeah, I can look over at those mountains out the window and they're always there. And everybody else who looks out that window sees those mountains too. That's the consensus. Probably the first time somebody looked out that window that didn't live there before or hadn't seen that window before got told, hey, come and look at this beautiful view of the mountains over there, you know. So that's one way to look at it. And I'm sure that's much more complicated than that or harder to understand. That's the simplified version. But I believe that it's all a consensus belief reality. I believe that the scriptures teach that in my Father's house are many mansions. Jesus said that, right? To me, that's true because there's consensus belief realities on the other side too. And so people will go where they're most comfortable with the consensus reality that they relate to the most until it's time for them to move on. So there's a lot of interesting thoughts on this. I recall an NDE that I read about or listened to on YouTube, I can't remember which, where the guy, his mom had passed away beforehand and he had an NDE experience and he saw his mom and she lived in this beautiful house in a beautiful neighborhood and everything was perfect, and not all the trouble and strife of the 3D world or of the earthbound reality, so to speak. And anyways, she said, this is heaven, welcome to heaven, or something to that effect, And for a time, it did seem like heaven to him. But he began to notice some inconsistencies with the heaven that his mom and the religion that she believed in when passing. And at one point he asked, well, if this is heaven, where's Jesus at? Oh, he's coming. He'll be coming eventually. Wait a minute. I thought, if you go to heaven, Jesus is supposed to be there, right? If you're a Christian. And so the thing that struck me about it, and I think him too, I don't remember all the details now. I might have to look that up and see if I can find that and listen to it again. It was a really cool one. Anyways, they had the same beliefs. That was a consensus belief reality, in my opinion. They had the same beliefs that they had on earth. Yeah, things were better and more beautiful and more how they expected heaven to be when they were on earth, but it wasn't quite, the heaven that it should have been, so to speak. So, and not necessarily that's a bad thing. It's that people are going to go where they're comfortable to go until they move on. Anyways, he got tired of it, and anytime he questioned it, like they would go to church on Sundays, and talk about Jesus and so on. And he would ask questions, like, well, where's Jesus? And if this is heaven, why is he not here? And he got kind of, I'm not sure what the word is. They didn't condemn him, but they looked down on that, kind of like if you ask uncomfortable questions in church on earth, you get this peer pressure that you shouldn't do that sort of thing. So anyways, at some point he ran across some other people that had those kind of questions, and somebody from I say a higher realm came and showed him that you don't have to stay here. You can move on to other realms, and that he could fly because everybody was walking around like they do here. But you're in heaven. You should be able to fly, right? So he went to some of these other realms with some of these other people that he met, and then he came back to try to tell the people, hey, this isn't heaven. You're not stuck here. You can move forward. Yeah, this is a nice place, and they condemned him as being of the devil. Same thing they would do on earth, because he didn't believe what they believed exactly. He questioned it. So I thought that was a really interesting NDE. I'm going to have to look that up and see if I can find it. And I can't remember now where I read it. It'll come to me eventually, though, now that I got my attention on it. So I thought that was really interesting. And so it's the same thing with the Great Awakening here on earth. People see things in the perspective of how they think it should be. And if somebody doesn't fit that perspective, they oftentimes will say, "Oh, well, that's a false awakening, or that's this or that." And it's religion all over again. "Oh, well, you don't believe in the same Jesus, or you're the same God because you believe this about God or that about God, and I don't agree with that." And so, humanity's come a long way, and there is a great awakening of sorts, but we've got a long ways to go, my friends, in my opinion. And I'm not saying I got it all figured out either, but at least I've come to a point where I know there's always more and that I don't have it figured out. Because when you start thinking you got it figured out because you've had some spiritual experience or this or that, thinking that's the be all end all, you can know for sure that you're off the track a bit. So, because there's so much more to know. And a lot of NDEers will say that. They came back, they went out to the other side and they felt like they knew everything, and then they came back and they couldn't remember it all. Because we're not supposed to here, because we're here to experience the limitations so that we can understand and fully appreciate what it means to be unlimited, so to speak, if you will. Omnipotent. I sometimes joke around, well, it's maybe half joking, but I think there's truth to it, that we came here because we were bored with being omnipotent. How's that? So we're experiencing a lot of the things, the opposites of a lot of the things that we experienced on the other side, or that we had access to, like omnipotence and knowing all things. Perhaps we didn't know all things because we had to come here to experience the opposites, so we didn't know what it was like to experience the opposite of, say, love. And that's one of the reasons we go through all of the negative experiences that we experience here in life. That's pretty hard for a lot of people to wrap their minds around. It was tough for me at first too, and some people won't accept that. They will eventually, but maybe not in this life, but maybe in another life or down the road somewhere, down the line somewhere. So yeah, so the Great Awakening is in degrees by individual, but there's enough people waking up to a certain degree that there's this mass awakening, and it's continuing. And that's what's causing a lot of the strife and problems that we see. And, and it's in the political realm too. All of the lies that have been exposed and the things that have been going on, the child trafficking and the money laundering and stuff that's been going on in our government, well, in the American government, and probably in all governments, probably across the world, that kind of thing, that all has a spiritual connotation to it too, or it's a reflection of the spiritual. So people are waking up to a lot of that stuff. And so the Great Awakening is not just a spiritual enlightenment awakening, it's a great awakening to all things, I guess you could say. In fact, there's a scripture that said all their sins will be spoken from the housetops. And of course, to the traditional Christian, that means everything that they've ever done wrong and so on will be exposed. That is happening, but what does sin mean? So sin is the root word that it's derived from in the Greek means to miss the mark. Okay, and in Old English, that was what when they were having a archery contest, and they were shooting targets to see who was the best archer, right? If you missed the target, they would say you missed the mark. And so that's what it really means. And so sin is not necessarily always the severely negative thing that so many religionists think it is. It's missing the mark, and you need to correct your aim, so to speak. So, like in archery, you don't quit and get depressed because you missed the target. You pull out another arrow and shoot again until you get it right. Keep doing it. That's a better understanding of sin, in my opinion. But anyways, so the sins will be spoken from the housetops, and that's literally happening today. That's you could say a prophecy fulfilled if you want to, because where are all those sins being exposed? On the internet. So how many of those internets are going through dishes and radio signals to the rooftops of houses and buildings and so on, and being exposed on everybody's computer and all the towers, the phone towers on your phone. So literally all of these things are being exposed from the air or the rooftops, if you will. So that's a pretty good allegory, if you ask me, for that. Something to think about there. So the other thing about the Great Awakening is it's not all positive either. You know, we're awakening to a lot of things that we need to address in ourselves as individuals and as a collective. So that's what a lot of these things that are happening right now. It's all our crap coming up, so that we know that's something that we need to address. It's all bubbling up, and this happens as an individual too. If you can learn to look at it and see it like that, it'll actually help you get through it, especially when it's your own stuff. Neville Goddard likes to say, don't get mad at anybody. They're just showing you who you are on the inside. Anybody that irritates you, I should say, or that upsets you, or what have you. You drew that to you to bring up because you have something in you similar to that, or that same thing, maybe in a different way, but that same thing that you need to address. And so when you get irritated at something, you need to do some introspection and ask yourself, why am I so irritated at that? You know, because usually if you take a step back and take a look at it from a third party point of view, it seems like it's insignificant. Why would I get upset over that? Especially with a family member or a loved one, you know, and those are what we call buttons or triggers. And they're things that we need to address. And those people that come into our life that push those buttons and triggers are there to bring those up for us to learn to address them. And that's often why it keeps happening over and over and never see, you know, you walk away from that person, you know, and you never see them again. Some other person comes into your life and pushes those same or similar buttons. When that happens to me now, I've learned to ask myself, okay, what is it that I need to address? What is it that's going on in me that keeps coming into my life? And I'm not perfect at it. And especially the older I get, it seems harder. Find the motivation to address those things. You know, I just want to live out the remainder of my days in peace and enjoy life. That's another thing. Enjoy life. We're here to have joy too, my friends. Live, love, laugh, you know, have that piece of cake or that piece of chocolate or whatever it is, or that beer or that glass of wine, instead of beating yourself up, and enjoy it. You know, if you're on a diet like I'm on the carnivore diet, or I should say ketovore, because I do eat some carbs now and then, and I take spells where I don't do it as well. And for a long time, I would feel guilty about that kind of stuff. And now I'm learning to, if I'm going to do that, you know, if I'm going to have that piece of cake or whatever it is, to enjoy it and not feel guilty about it, and then move back, and then move on and get back on to the wagon, so to speak, you know, when I'm done. And don't use it as an excuse to keep doing it. And so old habits die hard, as they say. So a lot of that comes from our programming that we got mostly as kids. Another thing I want to mention too is I had to pull back. I've been looking at the political stuff more often than I had in a long time, ever since the election. And I had to pull back from that, but I still take a peek now and then. And the one thing that amazes me is how everybody thinks they know what's going on because of what they read on social media, you know, or any kind of media, whatever media they get information from. They think they know what's going on and they got it all figured out. Yeah, you know what I'm going to say next, right? It's like, no, you never know unless you were there. You don't know. You may have some things right, and some things may be truthful, but a lot of it's partial truth. And a lot of it is misinformation to direct your attention in certain directions. You hear me say it all the time, where attention goes, energy flows. And so there are factions out there that want to direct your attention in certain directions to serve their agenda. And a lot of it is negative. And a lot of the stuff in media, social media, internet, TV, whatever, is negative for a reason, to direct your attention there, to keep us divided, to keep us in a negative mindset, so to speak. And there's energy vampires that feed off that negativity, both living and on the other side. So something to think about. That's why it's important to see the good in all things and see the positive in all things. It doesn't mean you can't get angry about something, or, you know, if it's deserved, but don't dwell there and don't use that as an excuse. You know, most people are angry about things that happened way in the past. They're still angry about it. Like, okay, what good is that doing you? So you're just punishing yourself, as they say. So, and that kind of ties into what I said earlier about, if you think you got it all figured out, you can know for sure you're probably off track because you're not going to figure it out. And that's where enjoy life comes in. Live, laugh, love, have some fun, whatever it may be. Or take some time to yourself if you want to take some time to yourself and read that book or, watch that movie or whatever it is, or work on your hobby, whatever that may be. Or just chill and relax if that's what you feel like doing. Sometimes that's what I feel like doing. And I found myself feeling guilty for doing that. Oh, I need to be out doing something. Like, well, maybe once in a while I can just chill and not have to worry about doing anything. So, and everybody's different. Everybody has different needs and so on. I need some silent time now and then, or not silent time, but alone time, I should say. I think everybody probably does that to a certain degree, but some more than others. And, and I'm going through changes in perspective and things as I get older. And so there is something to this age thing. I've always said that age is just a number, and it is in a lot of respects because there's people out there running marathons and lifting weights and doing all kinds of stuff, in their 60s, 70s, and 80s, and 90s even, some of them. You can look some of this up on the internet if you don't believe me. So it's all up here, friends. It's all a mindset. And be open-minded. There's a scripture that says, believe all things. Believe all things, not some things. Yet a lot of people who believe in the scriptures are very set on you should only believe this way or that way. Something else to think about. I mention scriptures and religion a lot because I came through that. But I'm not a religionist. I guess you could say I'm more spiritual if you could call it that. I like the word quantum, because quantum physics is starting to catch up with a lot of things that the ancient wisdom and religious teachings taught millennia ago. So I think that's pretty cool. So I try to be open-minded and I don't dismiss anything out of hand, even if it sounds way, way out there. And I catch myself sometimes being judgmental of stuff that I think is nuts. But then I go, well, wait a minute, And it's and not necessarily judging that it's nuts, but people for believing it, not realizing that I'm doing it, not thinking I'm doing it till I catch myself. Anyways, so the other thing too is you don't have to be perfect to shine your light, my friends. Shine what light you have, and in fact, that is a key to getting more light. Shine the light that you do have. You don't have to be perfect. You don't have to be a saint. Every saint has a past and every sinner has a future. That's one of my favorite quotes, and I don't remember who said that. If somebody remembers or knows where that came from, post it in the comments and let me know. That would be awesome. All right, my friends, it's just me rambling about some stuff. I hope maybe you got something out of it. And enjoy life. Live, love, have some fun. Peace out, my friends.